Hello, beloved souls. It's Adele here. Today's reflection is an invitation to slow down and look gently at something many aware people experience but rarely name out loud. There is something that is rarely spoken about in conscious spaces, not because it is uncommon, but because it is subtle and difficult to recognize while it is happening. Awareness is often described as liberating, expansive, even relieving, and all of that is true. Yet what is mentioned far less often is that awareness can also become heavy when it is carried continuously at the level of the mind, without enough grounding in the body, in rest, or in ordinary human experience. For many conscious people, this weight does not feel like external pressure. It feels like an inner sense of responsibility, a quiet but persistent attentiveness to thoughts, words, emotions, and impact. Awareness remains present, but it never quite settles. Over time, what was meant to bring spaciousness can begin to feel like something that must be maintained, monitored, or upheld, rather than something that supports and nourishes life. The intention of this reflection is to help awareness settle back into the body and into lived experience so that it no longer feels like something to carry, but something that can be lived. This is not a failure of awareness, and it is not a sign of going backwards. It is simply a phase that often arises when consciousness matures faster than integration. And because this weight develops gradually and inwardly, it often goes unnamed. Many people assume the tiredness means they are doing something wrong, when in reality, awareness may simply be asking to be held more fully, not only by the mind, but by the body, the breath, and the rhythms of being human. This reflection is not about refining awareness or elevating it further. It is about noticing when awareness has quietly become a burden and beginning to listen to what it needs in order to soften again. For many people, awareness does not become heavy all at once. It shifts gradually, so quietly that it often goes unnoticed until a sense of inner strain has already settled in. What begins as simple noticing slowly turns into a near constant inner attentiveness, where thoughts, emotions, words, and reactions are observed almost continuously, not with judgment, but with a sense of responsibility that rarely relaxes. Awareness remains present, yet it starts to hover slightly ahead of experience rather than resting fully within it. There is often an unspoken inner dialogue running in the background, not as criticism, but as a series of subtle questions. Am I responding consciously enough? Was that reaction aligned with what I know to be true? Did I hold the right energy in that moment, choose the right words, or respond in the most aware way possible? These questions are not wrong. They become heavy only when they never switch off. Even in ordinary interactions, awareness stays alert, quietly checking and recalibrating. Over time, this ongoing self-monitoring creates a gentle but persistent distance from immediacy. A feeling arises and is observed before it has fully landed in the body. A reaction appears and is assessed before it has been allowed to move through. An expression forms and is refined internally before it reaches the surface. Presence remains, but it becomes primarily mental, attentive rather than embodied. For some, this is also the stage where life, and even spiritual growth, quietly stops feeling enjoyable. What once felt curious, alive, and expansive begins to feel effortful, serious, or heavy, as though awareness has become a responsibility rather than a support. And at a certain point, another response can emerge. Out of sheer tiredness, awareness loosens its grip, not in a grounded way, but in a reactive one. There can be a phase where a person no longer wants to monitor, refine, or self-correct at all, and instead swings toward instinct, spontaneity, or indifference simply because they are exhausted from caring so much. This is the phase some people have jokingly referred to as the "don't give us" phase, where spiritual growth starts to feel like too much to ask, too tiring, or too burdensome, and there is a pull to return to an earlier version of the self that feels freer, less restrained, less responsible, and easier to live with. This is not freedom, and it is not failure. It is often a nervous system asking for relief. Because this shift happens gradually, it is rarely recognized while it is unfolding. Many people only notice it when a certain tiredness appears, not as physical exhaustion, but as an inner effort, as though consciousness itself has been quietly working without pause. This is often the moment when awareness begins to feel heavy, not because it has gone too far, but because it has turned into something that has to be maintained, rather than something that can just be lived. For many people, awareness becomes heavy, not because they are observing too much, but because they start expecting too much from themselves once they become aware. There is often a quiet belief that forms beneath the surface. Now that I see more, I should respond better, react less, remain calmer, and handle situations more consciously than before. Awareness slowly turns into an inner standard, and that standard is rarely adjusted when a person is tired, overwhelmed, or emotionally stretched. Instead of awareness offering support, it begins to function like an internal supervisor, tracking whether one is being patient enough, compassionate enough, regulated enough, or consistent enough in every moment. Even ordinary human reactions start to feel like something that needs to be corrected. This pressure can intensify when awareness becomes part of how a person is perceived, not necessarily because anyone demands it, but because expectations are quietly assumed both by others and by the self. Over time, this can create a sense that one should live up to a certain level of composure, insight, or alignment, even when life is asking for rest rather than refinement. This is where awareness stops feeling spacious and starts feeling like pressure. For sensitive or empathic people, this weight can grow further as awareness naturally extends beyond personal experience to include the emotions of others, the atmosphere of environments, or the broader state of the world. Without realizing it, some people begin carrying more than their own share of experience. Over time, the nervous system doesn't register this as wisdom, but as continuous effort. There is little room left to rest, to be unfiltered, or to respond naturally without immediately evaluating oneself afterward. This is when awareness becomes tiring, not because it is wrong, but because it is being used as a standard to live up to rather than a support to lean into. Awareness was never meant to replace being human. It was meant to accompany it. And when awareness is asked to carry constant responsibility without space for rest or softness, it inevitably becomes heavy. When awareness begins to feel heavy, it usually doesn't show up as something dramatic or alarming. More often, it appears as a gentle shift in how life is felt and engaged with. You might notice that your attention stays active even during quiet moments, as though awareness is present but not fully resting. Stillness is there, yet it does not quite settle in the way it once did. Some experiences may feel less spontaneous than before. Joy does not disappear, but it can feel a little more distant, as though awareness is watching the moment instead of relaxing into it. Decisions that were once intuitive may take a little longer, simply because the mind is more involved than necessary. There can also be a natural pull toward simplicity, less depth, fewer layers, more ease. This is not avoidance, but an instinctive rebalancing, a way the system creates space when it has been holding too much for too long. At times, the body gives the first signal through tiredness, restlessness, or a sense of fullness that sleep alone does not fully resolve. These are not warnings or problems to fix, but gentle cues asking for grounding and integration. Seen this way, burdened awareness is not something that has gone wrong. It is awareness signaling that it is ready to become more embodied, more rhythmic, and more at home in everyday life. Awareness does not need to be reduced, corrected, or switched off in order to feel lighter. More often, it simply needs a place to land. Rest, in this sense, is not withdrawal from life, nor a loss of consciousness. It is the easing of awareness out of constant mental observation and into the body, into breath, movement, and the ordinary flow of daily life. Integration happens when awareness no longer feels like something we are holding, but something that naturally accompanies what we are already doing. Walking, listening, preparing food, resting. Awareness is present, but it is no longer analyzing or refining the moment. It is simply there. This is where rhythm becomes essential. Awareness was never meant to be continuous commentary. There are moments for reflection and insight, and there are moments for living without interpretation. When these rhythms are allowed to alternate, awareness remains alive, spacious, and sustainable. It also means allowing periods where nothing needs to be understood, improved, or aligned. Awareness remains, but it is relaxed, no longer scanning experience for meaning or correctness. When awareness is given permission to rest in this way, it begins to feel supportive again. It softens, settles, and gradually moves from being something we manage to something that quietly carries us. This is not a step backwards. It is how awareness learns to live inside the human experience. When awareness becomes sustainable, it does not feel like something you are doing. It feels like something that is simply there, in the background, without effort. You might notice it in small, ordinary moments. You are walking, and you are just walking. You are listening to someone, and instead of monitoring your response, you are simply present. You speak when something needs to be said, and you stay quiet when it does not, without analyzing either choice afterward. Awareness is still present, but it no longer interferes with the moment. It does not comment on everything. It allows enjoyment, instinct, and simplicity to return without guilt. There is also more room to be human, to feel tired without fixing it, to be quiet without explaining it, to have moments of clarity and moments of confusion without turning either into a problem. At some point, there is a quiet realization that you are not here to carry the world, solve its problems, or hold everything together. You are here to be alive, to live your own life with sincerity, meaning, and care, not as a responsibility, but as an experience. When awareness lives like this, it supports life instead of sitting on top of it. It becomes something you live from, not something you manage. And when awareness feels like this, it no longer drains energy, it gives it back. Before closing, there is one important distinction worth naming, so these experiences are not confused. Burnout that arises from awareness or prolonged inner work is not the same as depression. Although both can involve tiredness or withdrawal, they feel very different from the inside. With awareness burnout, there is usually still a quiet sense of aliveness underneath the fatigue. Interest in life has not disappeared, but it feels temporarily buried under effort, responsibility, or over-attentiveness. Rest, grounding, and a return to ordinary enjoyment often bring relief. Depression, on the other hand, tends to involve a deeper loss of vitality, meaning, or connection to life itself. Things that once mattered may no longer register, and rest alone doesn't necessarily restore energy or interest. If what you are experiencing feels heavy, numb, or disconnected in a way that doesn't lift with gentleness, support, or grounding, it is important to take that seriously and seek appropriate care. this reflection is not about dismissing emotional pain. It is about recognizing when awareness itself has become tired and responding with softness rather than pressure. So, if awareness has felt heavy for you lately, there is nothing you need to fix, correct, or overcome. It may simply be a sign that awareness is ready to soften, to rest, and to live closer to the ground of everyday life. You do not need to carry the world in order to live consciously. You do not need to hold everything together to be aware. You are not responsible for managing the world's energy or carrying the weight of collective consciousness on your own. Mindfulness at the point of expression is wisdom. Permanent self-monitoring is exhaustion. Sometimes the most honest form of awareness is allowing yourself to be human, present, imperfectly perfect, and alive, exactly as you are. If this message spoke to your heart, allow yourself to release the pressure to carry, fix, or sustain everything, and simply notice what it feels like to live with awareness that does not exhaust you. Together, we raise the frequency of Earth, not by carrying more, but by learning to live consciously without burden, strain, or burnout. See you in the next video, where we'll take another step toward health, balance, and higher vibration.